For my social action research project, I am hoping to spread awareness about the Cuban embargo and the effects that it has had on Cuban Americans. The biggest effect being that many Cuban Americans cannot come into contact with their family that still may be trapped in the communist country of Cuba. The Cuban embargo began when the people of Cuba had a revolution to overthrow their old dictator named Batista in 1959. When this happened, a new dictator named Fidel Castro took control of Cuba. Fidel Castro was allied with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. This agitated the United States because they were enemies with the Soviet Union. The United States government decided to put an embargo on Cuba so that they would be deprived of resources until their government gave in to the United States. Unfortunately, to this day, which is almost 60 years later, Fidel Castro's government is still in place. While the Cuban government looks strong on the exterior, it's the people in the interior that are suffering the most from the embargo. People living in Cuba are suffering economic hardship, and most Cubans have fallen into poverty. Many Cubans have tried to flee from their country. Many of them have made it to the United States, but also many were and still trapped in Cuba or didn't have the chance to reach the United States at all. My grandfather is part of the group of Cubans that were fortunate enough to escape their country. I asked him if I could interview him about his experience as a Cuban and his thoughts about the Cuban embargo. So when did you flee Cuba, and what was the condition of the embargo like at that time?
The embargo was very bad. You can't find nothing. That was the reason they deprived you of your own money.
So when did you flee Cuba?
When do I leave Cuba? May 28, 1962.
Do the people of Cuba like the communist dictatorship that Castro has set up?
No.
Why not?
Especially the educated people.
Okay, would the Cuban government do cruel things to people?
Believe me, yes. If you are not with the government, either you do it in jail or you end by being killed.
Are there many human rights in Cuba?
I don't know any at that time.
So do people.
Fidel Castro was the god of Cuba.
What do you mean by that?
They mean that had to be, Fidel Castro talked every night on TV. Okay? And you have to listen what Fidel Castro say. His next day, one of your co-worker asked you, did you see what Castro said last night? I said, no, I went to sleep. Oh, you are, then you was bad. You was considerate, you don't like Fidel Castro. You don't like the revolution.
Have you ever been arrested in Cuba?
Yeah, I was arrested three times.
For what?
The first time, my office is supposed to supply the hospital, every floor of the hospital, with whatever they needed for every day. And that was the day of Playa Girón. Then everybody was excited. Fortunately, I have a radio in my office. Fortunately for me and for the girl who worked with me. And the news was all over, and they keep on giving news every minute, and everybody want to listen to the news. And I had to cut it off the radio and say, hey, I need to do my job. And I got everybody out of my office. Well, they come and get me in jail because they say I was against the government. 3 days after that, a director of the hospital find out what happened. And he demand to get me out of jail.
What happened the second time you were arrested?
The second time it was the second time I already decide to leave Cuba because I don't like the system. And my wife was pregnant. And then we was living in a house, it was a kind of little big, and they told us we had to leave the house. Give it to somebody else, and they give a place to live, an apartment to live.
For you to live in?
Eh?
For you to live in?
For us to live, yeah. Because the house, the bigger family, they can put biggest family in that house when we don't need it. Because we was 2 people, and the house got 4 bedrooms. Okay? And they say they can give people who don't have places, to live, and they can live there, and we can move wherever they give us the apartment. And when we was moving, we was taking some stuff, we don't supposed to take nothing, but I have a big radio, a 2-band radio, where we can hear the news from the United States or any other country. And I want to give it to my father. And we wait at night time and put it in my car. And when we was leaving the house, we was stopped by the, what they calling the,
The police?
yeah, the police. And asked us where we was going. And we told them I go over my father. And they checked up the car and find the radio. I said, what is that radio doing there? And I had to tell him. I say, I take it over. I say, no, you cannot take it over your father. That does not belong to your father. You have to leave that in the house. Because you cannot take nothing out of the house. Because I already resigned my job, and they make an inventory of my house because I supposed to leave to the United States. They come in and make a note of everything it was in the house, and we cannot touch it. We had to leave it to the house the same way and I was taking the radio. And that was my second time. My wife was pregnant. Maria was, she was 7 or 8 months, and we wasn't in jail too long, overnight.
Okay, do you have any relatives left in Cuba? Did they ever want to escape to the United States?
At that time, I have a sister. She wanted to come in, and she came in 1971.
Okay. Do you have relatives that escaped to the U.S., and how did they escape?
I have a brother.
And he escaped to the United States?
Yeah, he is a doctor. He's escaped to the United States, but he cannot work as a doctor in the United States.
How did you escape Cuba? Was it difficult?
The reason it was difficult is because I sold my car. I'm not supposed to sell nothing. I sold my car, and when I went to the airport, they asked me where my car was. You're supposed to bring the car to the airport and give it the keys. And the car had to be running in good shape. And they asked me, that was the 15th of December. And I told them I sold my car. And they told me, well, you cannot go. Then I had to go back and buy my car again. my own car.
So that you could leave leave to the United States.
Then I can leave the 28 after I give it, I give the keys of the car and I receive the keys of the car, my account in the bank.
So when did
which
you?
was $10,000.
Wow. So when did you
At
arrive?
that time,
Okay.
today it will be a lot of money.
So when did you arrive to the United States?
When do I arrive?
Mm-hmm.
May 28, 1962.
Hey, what was it like for you when you first arrived in the U.S.? Where did you live?
I was living with my sister-in-law for a month.
Your sister-in-law?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, my great aunt. Okay. So where did you live?
I remember it was 8th Street and 8 and 96 on the west, southwest. Southwest.
Of New York?
No, Miami.
Florida?
Yeah, Florida.
Okay, how did United States citizens treat you when you first arrived?
Wonderful.
They were
Yeah,
nice?
no problems, no. Yeah, we're not.
What was the first job you had in the United States?
The first job I have in United States was in Boston,
Massachusetts?
Massachusetts. We find a church to find me a job over there in Massachusetts. We find sponsors in Massachusetts in a little town called Lunenburg. And they send for us, they pay for everything, and they put a small apartment for us. And all the people in the church, they donated something to the house. A table, a chair, a plate to eat. It was a small supermarket in the town, and everybody, we can go and buy grocery, and they don't charge nothing to us. The town was paying for the people in the town. It was only 600, around between 600 and 700 people in that town.
So how is living in the U.S. different from living in Cuba?
You can sleep peaceful.
Peacefully?
Peaceful. Very difficult for me because I don't speak one word in English.
When you first came?
When I first came.
So is that like the biggest difference?
Oh, yes, because I can communicate with people. They find me a job in the factory called Charlton Company, who is a factory who I think it still exists. That Charlton Company is in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, which only was about 6 miles. And they make furniture. And in the beginning was very tough because I have a man who can talk a little bit Spanish, and he teach me my job, what I have to do. But I can communicate with the other people. Then I worked so hard, and they liked me so much. They offered a job at night time for me, just for me, to go and do the job I had to do, and and I worked like that for a little while. After a little while, I came back to the daytime work after I understand a little more.
So if you could go back to Cuba, would you?
No.
Why not?
Because it's no freedom.
In Cuba?
It's no freedom for nothing.
What were the living conditions like when you lived in Cuba? Do you know what they're like now?
Wonderful. When I live in Cuba, it was wonderful. There's no other country can live like that.
Until Fidel Castro took over.
Before Fidel Castro.
So, do you know what the conditions are like now?
I know the condition where they live now because I lived for 3 years over there. It was very tough. You cannot find nothing. You cannot buy nothing. You was watch out every minute of the day what you do, what you was doing. You cannot talk. You have to watch out who you talking with. Because at that time everybody was, that was what Castro, the revolution, bro, break the families. They want to break the family. They want to make families enemy, each one to each other. And that happened over my family, over my wife's family, and everybody. We usually go to my wife's grandmother every Sunday to play domino, to this one, and after Castro took over, we can get there no more. Because part of the family was with Castro and part of the family was against Castro, but we cannot talk.
What do you think of Obama's law that enables money to be sent to people in Cuba?
That's terrible.
Why is it terrible?
It's terrible because the people in Cuba don't receive no money. You send it. Because it happened to me because I usually send money. But the people in Cuba, before in Cuba was the same money you have here. The same money we have here, that was the money in Cuba. $1, a quarter, a nickel, a penny. It was no different. But Castro changed the money. And they got the money from Venezuela who have no value. And when you send, like I send $200 in Christmas to my sister over there, they give it 200 bolivars.
Which is the Venezuelan
Well, it's
currency.
no nothing, it's no value, but they kept the dollar.
They kept your money?
Yeah, they kept my money. Yeah, they kept the dollar.
The government did.
The government in Cuba kept the money, the dollar, but they give it, they give it $200 to my, to the 200 bolivars. Which it means about $15.
$15?
Yeah, the value of $15.
Do you think that non-Cuban citizens should visit Cuba and spend money there?
No.
Why not?
Eh?
Why not?
Because they keep, that is what kept the Cubans.
The government?
Yeah.
That's what keeps the government?
Because they spend the dollar over there. That is the dollar they used to survive.
Do you think it would be a good idea for the United States to end the embargo on Cuba?
That one, I don't know too sure about that. Because the poor people are suffering over there. Castro gathered it, suffering. They are the one who paying for that. It's no Castro. Castro have everything in his house, but the poor people don't have nothing.
So do you think it would be a good idea to take the embargo away?
I don't know. I cannot answer that. I don't want to be in the middle of the water.
Okay, well, gracias, papi.
Okay.